skills-based volunteering, this is very deliberately a small group of people, because what I want to do next in this area is get BCS community leaders, and that's largely going to be chairs and vice chairs of member groups, but maybe a few others as well, involved in trying to establish what this is and how it's going to work. So what I'll talk about, as you will have seen in the agenda already, introductions. That's introducing both myself and the subject. And then I'll talk a bit about my motivation. This is my personal motivation for getting involved in this space. And then I'll tie this into a line that we use really quite a lot at BCS, which is making IT good for society. And that's going to be a really, really simple tie-in. I think there's one really, really brief slide on that one. And I really, really very much hope that you can all now imagine what that slide is going to say. I'll talk then about the current players outside of BCS, so who's currently working in this area nationwide. So there probably is a worldwide picture to this as well. I'm going to limit what I talk about today to a UK-wide picture, but I will talk about who the players are outside BCS. And then I'll talk about the BCS players, who's going to get involved in this from a BCS point of view. And as chairs and VCs, even those of you who are new to the roles, you'll appreciate, I think, that BCS has several different bits to it. And there's maybe half a dozen or so different pieces inside BCS that will have a role to play in this. And then I'll talk about a vision, my vision for this area for the next, I will say next year or so, I think. And I want to say stolen, I've borrowed the phrasing of this vision from something I learned in the past year or so from the Digital Divide Specialist Group, which is how to write one of these vision statements. And I'll punt that out and perhaps not dive into too much detail today about what that vision should look like and how we can modify that vision. But I absolutely do want to get people's input, and I'll share this afterwards with this group and a wider group to see how we can elaborate that vision a little bit and make sure that we agree on it. And once we have that vision, I think we'll be in a good place to get a few more volunteers involved to actually put that vision into action as a goal for the next year or so. And then I'll cover what I think the next steps are and what we as a group here today and what others in our member groups can do next to push this along. Apologies, I've had to pick two screens at once. So from an introduction point of view, this is really about me. So my background here is I've been a charity trustee outside BCS. I was a trustee for a couple of years of a charity called the Friends of the RUH. The RUH is the hospital here in Bath, the Royal United Hospital. So I was a trustee for a couple of years of the Friends. Many hospitals will have a charity sitting alongside them that does the kind of things you might expect a charity sitting alongside a hospital to do. So providing volunteers who, initially for me, it was tea and coffee rounds was my main instigator. So providing chat, teas and coffees, personal interaction to patients where they might not have any. That to me is a massive, massive thing. That's what I wanted to do in the hospital. In fact, they didn't need to do that, so I became a trustee instead. So from that point of view, I saw really quite a lot of the way that charities are sitting on the wrong side of the digital divide. So from a digital divide point of view, charities can be affected really in different ways, but in really, really similar ways to people. So unable to use the tech that the rest of us take for granted when we use the internet. Charities can suffer from that in a different way, but in a really similar way. So I'm the vice chair and I'm the VCO. So I'll tell you what the VCO role is today. That's the Volunteer Coordination Officer. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Of the Digital Divide Specialist Group. That's a specialist group inside BCS. And that's fairly new. We've been around as a specialist group for about 3 years now, I think. I am an ambassador for the Digital Poverty Alliance. I haven't worked a great deal with them explicitly in the past year or so, but BCS has now got some really strong ties with the DPA, with the Digital Poverty Alliance, and we go to events nationwide with them, and we work really quite closely with them in general. From a local point of view, I also work with the Bath Digital Divide Collective. That's a local group doing something really similar. But the stakeholders here, the participants in this local group, are different. It's not just about tech people doing stuff. It's much, much more about a collective of stakeholders from that wider range, which is those of us who know about the technology, who can provide some of the solutions to these problems, but also those who work really closely with charities and with other groups who might benefit from this stuff. So from those points of view, really thinking about skills-based volunteering outside BCS, where the beneficiaries are outside BCS. I'm also the inclusion officer for the Pride Specialist Group, which has been around since pretty much exactly the same amount of time as the Digital Divide Specialist Group. And I'm the chair of the Bristol and Bath branch as well. Oops, so again, trying to click two sets of windows. So, so my motivation for wanting to do this, my motivation for wanting to be involved in this volunteering effort is really all of those things that I've just talked about. I want to see volunteering done well. But my motivation for trying to get skills-based volunteering up and running in a more general sense is really that I've seen volunteering being ineffective. So without diving into too much detail and saying bad things about people who are already volunteering, I really don't want to do that because volunteering is massively valuable. I have seen people who got IT skill doing volunteering in other areas. And I have no objection at all, by the way, to people doing volunteering that is not skills-based, that is not related to our day jobs. Because ultimately, charities largely want things done that are not related to IT and technology. So in fact, my initial motivation for getting involved with the hospital charity was the teas and coffees thing. The teas and coffees thing, it's not a metaphor really, it's a vehicle, I suppose. While volunteers deliver teas and coffees to patients in hospital, what they're really doing there is providing personal contact to people who wouldn't otherwise have it, and they're in hospital, and they're ill, and they're worried and anxious. And that, to me, is the actual detail. That's the actual benefit of this charity effort. But maybe we can be more effective if we use our skills to enable the charities to do their thing more effectively so that others can do their thing more effectively. This is the goal. This is my aim here, is to say the charities that can suffer from digital divide stuff, we can improve that. And if we can make the charities themselves more effective, have their comms work better, have their advertising work better, have their just general day-to-day admin work better, then the charities can improve what they do, and then the people that they benefit can get that benefit. It doesn't need to be me ditching my day job in the evenings to do the actual volunteering stuff that charities need. It can be something else. And maybe overall, while that might not give me the warm, fuzzy feeling that the front line volunteering gives me, it might just be the most effective way of doing stuff. So that's my motivation for doing this. Sorry, managing many windows at once is tricky. So here's a quote from something I wrote for BCS that I had previously written for the Digital Poverty Alliance. Why we're doing this. My own skills and experience don't equip me to get so directly involved or as effectively in every area. So this is my thing. In an area where I have the skills and experience to act to address an issue that affects people more vulnerable than me, I can do that. This, for me, is the one-liner that, well, it's not one liner, it's several lines. This is the thing. I can't do all of the things that charities need to be done, but I can help out in some way. If I can use my skills to effectively help out a charity in whichever way, then I'm going to do that. And that's what this is all about for me. That's why I'm here. That's why I want other people to get involved. So making IT good for society is a line that we use regularly at BCS to describe the way that we interact with the world. And this is the one where I really hope people are not going to be surprised by what I'm saying here. Making IT good for society is BCS's main motivation. And why would we do this? Why would we not? I mean, this is just the most simple of all the questions that we can possibly think about here. Why would we not do this? We've got the skills to do some good for charities, for others, for society in general. We kind of have to do that because we can. That's the only reason. It needs to be done and we can do it. So I'll talk now a bit about vision framing here, because while others on the call might well have more experience than I do in how this kind of thing works, this is a phrasing, a style of writing that I only discovered personally when I worked at the Digital Divide Specialist Group in the early days of setting up the Digital Divide Specialist Group. And at the risk of dumbing things down and assuming that you don't know as much as I do in this area, apologies for that, but that's the only way I can think of to say this. This is really about pretending that it's a year from now, looking around the landscape of where we are and saying, what do things look like? What do I want things to look like in a year? Which is why I'm calling this a vision. Again, apologies, you may well, or you probably are, I'm imagining, all more experienced in this area than I am, so better place to appreciate how one writes a vision. But for me, this is what I want the vision to be, and I'm absolutely open. In fact, I'm absolutely hoping that others will get involved in this and improve this vision. But for me, the vision is threefold. There are three separate but very, very related bits. I should have numbered these, in fact, but they're bullet points here. The first of these, and I'll be honest, if I could achieve just this one in a year, I would be ecstatic. So the first point of this vision, I think, is IT professionals who want to volunteer their time and skills for free can easily find effective ways to do so without admin hassles. So for me, in fact, I've had a conversation, I've had many, many conversations, in fact, over the past 6 months or a year to say, I would quite like to do some volunteering. So I've done some skills-based volunteering. I've done little bits of stuff for charities. I've done long-standing roles for charities. I've done a few things in the middle, but not many. And one thing that has come up over and over again for me is actually it's not easy to do. The IT stuff, the volunteering stuff is easy to do because it's my day job. You know, I know how to do this stuff. In reality, the things that charities need to be done are things that everybody on this call, BCS leaders, all, and in fact, really, really minimally experienced members of BCS would find incredibly simple. The things that charities want done are largely not masses of software written or really, really complex understandings of how cloud works. It's actually stuff that we would find really, really simple. It's things like, how do I get email to work? How do I get online? How do I connect to whatever service it is? How do I use the web effectively? Who do I speak to get a bit of web stuff done? All these things will be incredibly simple for some members of BCS, for some people who might want to do the volunteering. The tricky part, in my experience, in my few years' experience now, has been the admin stuff. And that includes things like understanding where these charities are that need stuff done. Who is it that needs stuff done? How do I find a volunteering opportunity? How do I overcome any imposter syndrome that I might have to understand things like, oh, you want something that simple. I thought you wanted something much more complex. You don't. You just want something really simple. I've had a number of conversations recently, in fact, because I need some woodwork done. And I've spoken to people who've got skills in this area, and they've all been kind of astonished that I couldn't do it. I can't. It's not really my skill set. That disparity between things that people think are going to be really hard and the simplicity that other people view these things with, that's massive. From a charity point of view, there's a lot of that going on. We are professionals in this area. We know a load of stuff. We are going to be able to do all these things really, really simply. That's where that benefit comes from. The admin is what gets in the way, I think, really quite a lot of the time. So just to summarize again, I want that first statement of the vision to be IT professionals who want to volunteer their time and skills for free can easily find effective ways to do so without admin hassles. I have no objection, by the way, to making this a chargeable service if it's, you know, cheaper than normal. I think that's probably not the right way to go, but I am entirely open to seeing these things changed a bit if we need to. So the second of these points in the vision is professionals in BCS are encouraged to volunteer in ways that both use and enhance their skills. So for me, this is super similar. So rather than simply providing the infrastructure, which is what point 1 does, what I would additionally like to do is say, okay, the infrastructure is there. If you are a professional member of BCS or MBCS or CITP or CEng, or you've got whichever of our professional qualifications is most appropriate to you, and you are claiming professionalism. You've signed up to the code of conduct. You've got the title, the kudos attached to being professional inside a professional body, inside BCS. That's not enough. It's not just enough that you stick by the code of conduct, although maybe if the code of conduct gets changed, it will be enough. I want BCS to encourage this kind of volunteering, not just go out in society and do stuff, make IT good for society, but do it in ways that use your skills. If you're a professional member of a professional body, yeah, thanks, Antonio. Absolutely keen on getting input into this one, so I'll come back to that comment in a moment, if that's okay. Professionals in BCS encouraged to volunteer. So I want BCS to actually do the encouragement, not just saying the infrastructure is there for anyone who wants to use it, but encouraging that volunteering. So not just using your skills either, but enhancing your skills. So here we're thinking about things like mentoring, tying in with CPD, using Sophia Plus, using Sophia to understand what the gaps are in my current skill set. Where do I want to go in my career? What additional skills can I get, can I enhance that will make my CV look better? And how can I do that through volunteering? How can I do that in a way perhaps that my day job doesn't allow, but in a way that working for a charity might allow? There's a win-win here. The charity wins by getting some volunteering efforts. I win by getting new skills. If BCS can step in and say, we can provide the infrastructure, we can put you in touch with people who can do some admin stuff like finding resources, finding requirements, doing DBS, all these kind of things. There's admin stuff to be done to make that work, but encouraging people to actually do it. If you're a professional, we want you to be doing volunteering. That's the second part of the vision. The third part of the vision is where I suspect I will get a bit more pushback. So I don't think anyone's going to disagree with number one. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with number one. I strongly suspect that nobody will disagree with number two. I start to think that perhaps people will disagree a little bit with me on the third one. The third one, fellows and potential fellows are required to lead volunteering efforts in ways that make IT good for society. So again, I come back to the standard BCS line, make IT good for society. The distinction here for fellows and potential fellows for me is twofold. It's the requirement rather than simply the encouragement, and it's the requirement to lead volunteering efforts rather than simply doing some volunteering. So I would very much like to have a scenario where fellows and people applying for fellowship are asked the question, what do you do in the volunteering space? What do you do outside of your day job for free that makes IT good for society? And if the answer to that question from a potential fellow is, my day job is really super busy and I don't do any of that, I just do my day job. I do really well at my day job. I'm a leader in industry. I do my day job. I'm paid for that. So I think personally for me, and I realised I'm not speaking for BCS here, by the way, the answer, and bear in mind, of course, that I'm not myself a fellow. I want the answer to that to be, okay, that's fine, you carry on, but that's not what fellowship is. What I personally would like fellowship to be is those who are leading these voluntary efforts, leading these external efforts. So mentoring, getting others to do this volunteering stuff, doing the stuff ultimately that I'm doing now, I think is the kind of thing I'm thinking of. So that really is my threefold vision for what I want to see a year from now. So I'll undoubtedly come back to that in a few minutes, because I do want to get some discussion on this, and we will have some time at the end for this kind of discussion. But that, for me, and again, the phrasing here is pretend that it's a year from now. We look around, what do we want to see? What do we want to see in a year that we don't currently see? That's the vision of what I want to see from this effort. So I'll talk now about the VCO role. So the VCO role, apologies, there's a lot more words there than I intended. I will talk through all this stuff. There's nothing really here that I'm not going to talk about separately. So the VCO here is the Volunteer Coordination Officer. So this is a role, this is not currently a role that's defined by BCS, apart from the fact that I've submitted a draft of this role description to BCS. So this role description, the text here, by the way, is not just the description of the role. I wrote the role description and I have drafted it for BCS. I don't think that I want this to be a mandatory role, by the way. I think I want this to be an optional role. And I think that currently it's still drafts. It's drafted every way. It's drafted in a technical sense. It's not been approved by anybody. It's also drafted in a more practical sense in that nobody very much outside, except me, has had an input into writing this. So I've written this. Thanks, Antonio, again. So that what I think the role here is that there are many different kinds of BCS member groups. So broadly speaking, we have branches that have that UK-based regional flavour, that regional character. We have sections which are similarly regional but outside the UK and probably therefore a bit bigger in geography and subject to different cultures. How do charities work? How does the geography work? How do people work? That kind of thing is going to be different outside the UK. And in fact, even inside the UK in various places, it'll be different. So England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, they're going to have different natures of how charities work. But those two are the ones that have a kind of regional geographic focus. Chapters are student bodies inside student organisations, and there's a fairly natural geography to those as well. And then we have specialist groups, which do not have that geographic culture, really, but do have a specialism. And in fact, in reality, there's at least two different kinds of specialist group. There are the specialist groups that talk about a specialism which is technical, which is an IT-related specialism. So programming or project management or, quantum computing or whatever kind of technical specialism there might be. But the other key ones, I think, are what we are now beginning to call equity groups, which are specialist groups where the specialism is not just an IT thing, where the specialism is, in fact, I work for Digital Divide. The specialism there is really, I guess it's a bit of both. It's an IT thing, but it's also a societal, cultural thing. It's really about poverty and disadvantage and how people work and how people don't get to take advantage of the things that our industry can offer. And the Pride specialist group, where the kind of twofold nature of the Pride interactions with the BCS are really that inside our industry, we do see discrimination and disadvantage in various ways, and the LGBTQ communities are one area where we see that, and there are others, there are many others. And the other one, though, is how BCS can interact with those same communities outside BCS by considering how technology and these various overlaps, I'm all about the overlaps, as I've said a number of times already, I think, overlaps with these groups. So, for example, data breaches of social media apps can have a significantly different impact on those in LGBTQ communities than others, simply because we have discrimination in society. So there's a load of stuff where these various different kinds of BCS member groups can have different ways of working in the space. Local geography might well mean working with small charities. Pride SG might work well with charities at that national level that share that particular specialism and overlap. And the other bits of BCS naturally are things like council, the trustee board, influence board, community support committee, the CSC. So there's many different BCS entities, some of which are volunteer-led, like the member groups, some of which aren't. I think the VCO role, though, is going to change as we begin to define it. Ultimately, at the moment, it's basically something like member group committees, member groups in general, can work in this space. So find a way where your member group has a natural way of working with volunteers that are going to volunteer outside BCS and make that work. And the initial VCOs are going to be the ones that put the effort into defining what that role looks like, how that role works, how that role works with others. So the entities here are things like local charities support charities, NCVO, you'll see there, by the way, NCVO, FCVO, NICFA, so that's the National Council of Voluntary Organisations, the Scottish Council of Voluntary Organisations, and the Northern Ireland Council of Voluntary, I think they're associations. So these are really similar bodies around the UK that are national-ish, so certainly national, but not UK-wide, not all UK-wide, entities that help out charities, that get charities and other voluntary bodies to get together and share their learnings and experiences. And there's undoubtedly going to be a way in which we work together with those. So the current players, so some of those are the current players outside BCS. So outside of BCS, I want to stress, by the way, that the kind of skills-based volunteering that I'm talking about does already happen. I don't think it happens in a way that's currently well coordinated enough, and I think we can do better. I also do want to recognise, though, that it does already happen. There are people doing skills-based volunteering, and that skills-based volunteering is largely, of course, done by individual volunteers. So when we think about the people who are already doing stuff in this space, what we're thinking about is individual volunteers, individual people working for charities and other organisations to do whatever it is that they need doing. And again, NCVO, SCVO, and NICFA are these national organisations where voluntary organisations get together and share their learnings and experiences and get some kind of benefit from those memberships. Additionally, Reach Volunteering is an organisation with which BCS already has a relationship. If you're more familiar, you might already be more familiar with STEM learning, which works in a really similar way. So I say this because I was more familiar with STEM learning when I learned about Reach Volunteering. And it's basically an organisation that allows charities to register, thanks, Antonio, allows charities to register their requirements and allows others to fill those requirements. So it's a meeting place almost, or a jobs board, where charities can say, I need someone to be a trustee with some IT experience. Can someone do that for the next 3 years? And someone can see that ad and say, yeah, I can do that for free. That's kind of the method here. I don't think, though, that it works well enough. I think it's not used nearly enough by people in our industry, by people inside BCS. And I think that we can do better. And I think that we must do better. But Reach Volunteering, though, are undoubtedly, again, going to have a role to play in any picture we draw in this area. Other professional bodies as well, though. So I think one of the models, there's two models really that I'm keen on. One is project program management and management of things like projects and programs. Partly because an old friend of mine got in touch recently and said, I saw that talk that you did last August. I did a talk on this back in August with the South Wales branch, with jointly between our two branches. And a friend of mine came up and said, well, I'm actually a manager of some kind, and I'd quite like to do that. And I see where you're coming from, but how about managers doing this? And I thought, yeah, that kind of works. That very much works. Undoubtedly, there will be others who've got skills that aren't IT related that can be used in this space. Another reason, though, why other professional bodies is going to be key is because the finance people, I think, are considerably ahead of us in this space. So if we think about charity, trustee boards, that kind of space, that top level space inside a charity, we have treasurers, we have external auditors, we have accountants, but we have treasurers. Treasurer is basically a trustee who is qualified. Now, off the top of my head, others might know this, I think it's a requirement that charity treasurers be qualified. In my, I won't say limited experience, in my experience, it's common that they are qualified. Even if it's not a requirement, even if it's only common, that still puts the finance people a step ahead of us. Because what we're seeing here is somebody with a professional qualification volunteering their professional skills for a charity for free. Now, treasurers, in fact, I think can be paid. Well, we don't pay trustees, well, we're not allowed to pay trustees. There's a limited circumstance in which I think we can pay trustees for their professional services. But you see where I'm going with this, I think. We already have this notion that trustee boards need to have treasurers. Trustee boards need to have this volunteering done. They need these skills to operate. And the same is true of IT. The same is absolutely true of IT. In the space that we work in, we've got to do better in this. And then finally, well, probably not finally on my list is things like Baines 3SG and VOSCA. So Baines is Bath and North East Somerset. Baines is the name of our local council. Baines 3SG is a third sector group, that's 3SG. That's a charity here whose goal is to support other charities. So their role as a charity is charity support. Similarly, VOSCA in Bristol do a really, really, really similar thing, do the same thing, in fact. So that's at least half a dozen-ish, that's 5. There's at least 5 different players who are already working in this space. So I think, again, when we draw the picture of how this stuff works, these 5 groups of people are going to be players in this picture because they already are players in this picture. We, if anything, are coming to this picture late and we're joining them. I think we've got a massively beneficial role to play, but we're coming a little bit late to the party here, I think. So I'll talk now about the BCS players. So I've mentioned already that I meant to click that, there we are. I mentioned already that we have various bits inside BCS, so I'll rattle through these fairly quickly. There might be a few others that I've missed, in fact. So branches, sections, and chapters, these are kind of geographic. Chapters maybe a little bit less so because they talk about student groups inside universities and colleges. That's still pretty much a geographic breakdown, not quite, but kind of. Specialist groups that have a technical IT specialism. And then additionally, equity groups. These are BCS specialist groups like Digital Divide, University, and Pride, and certainly others. Those are the new ones that I'm associated with. Those ones where the specialism is not the IT thing, where the specialism is something else, something outside of BCS's remit. But those overlaps, again, I love the overlaps. CSC, Community Support Committee, is a BCS committee that helps out these groups in general. And again, undoubtedly, that's going to have a role to play in drawing this picture. Influence board. That's going to be a more complex one, I think, because it's not just a really direct overlap. The influence board is going to influence society. That's one of the ways that BCS plays influence, exerts its influence outside of BCS. But I still think there's going to be some overlap there. And then finally-ish, council and trustee board. So I've taken up a seat on the council again. So I sit on the council now and will do for the next 3 years or so. And trustee board. I'm not on trustee board, but trustee board has some ex officio places and some council places. And trustee board is ultimately, well, it's the kind of thing we're talking about, in fact, at the top end. BCS is a charity. BCS has a trustee board. So we can see that mirrored here. Pardon me, it might be a bit of a cold. So one of the ways that BCS is distinct from the charities that we might help directly, though, is that BCS being a national charity rather than a small local one. One of the things that we're going to see is that BCS can afford to pay people to do this stuff. And in this area, generally, BCS has got the money to pay full-timers and the expertise to do it ourselves. Yeah, we're not short of people who know how the IT works. But small local charities, which is why I'm talking about branches initially, the smaller ones may well not have the money to pay full-time IT staff. So that's where that distinction is going to be key. We're going to see that those smaller ones can't afford to do it. So it has to be free because they haven't got any money. They haven't got enough money to pay for themselves. So that summary is of who's already working in this space and who are the players going to be. So that total of outside BCS and inside BCS, that's comfortably a dozen or so different groups of people. Never mind the ones I've forgotten or the individuals coming from those groups. There's going to be a big old group of people getting involved in this space. So in summary, and I really do intend to leave time to talk through this a little bit once I finish talking myself. In summary, there are about half a dozen or so bits of BCS to get organised. And from an individual region point of view, there's roughly-ish 50-odd different regions to get volunteers from. So that local flavour is going to be a thing. There's lots and lots of local regions. So I think initially it would be foolish to try and get all of those involved. So we're doing really quite a lot of stuff here in Bristol and Bath in terms of getting engaged with these local charities. Certainly Fiona Dawson leading the Digital Divide Collective is going to be a key player here. I would be keen though on getting some info from different geographies to have others involved. There's maybe half a dozen or so different kinds of non-BCS organisation to work with. So not just different organisations, but half a dozen different kinds of organisation. So this is not just about different bodies, but the overall structure, the shape of these bodies is different. So NICFA, NCVO, SCVO, national, they are themselves charities, but they're really charity support things, charity support charities. Sorry, one more arrival. Charity support charities, individuals, small charities, different size charities. There's loads of different kinds of body that I've spoken about already. Other professional bodies. So, and again, the two that I've mentioned already are the finance people, because they do this already, and I think they do it better than we do. So I think we can learn from them. And the management people, because I think that that has probably got, and even from my limited perspective, as beneficial an impact as we can provide. So imagine a small local charity who's got a turnover of, a few hundred grand. They've got one member of staff and a few volunteers. Imagine the potential benefit that they might get by having a professional manager come in and say, I know how to do this stuff. I do half a day a month volunteering. I do this for charities, and I do some mentoring, and I do some encouragement, and I do some just professional help, and I'll just tell you what to do. Imagine the potential benefit that a small charity might get from that. And then imagine how getting involved in an organisation like NCVO to say, okay, let's share that learning. Let's not just do it 5,000 times around the country. Let's do it effectively once and share that learning. The potential benefit here is absolutely massive. So the next steps here, I think, again, I will say, there's plenty of questions in the chat. I think the next steps initially, to my mind, are these. Get some more VCOs. So VCOs are these volunteer coordination officers, and that's this new role that we have not yet entirely defined, but have drafted. Consider that vision and the VCO role description. So let's elaborate a little bit on the vision and the VCO role itself. And then let's get some BCS staff involved. We have CSC, the Community Support Committee. We have BCS staff. We have people who work full-time for BCS who know more about the relevant bits of how this kind of thing works than I do. We'll get them involved. Once we've done all of that, we can begin to publicise, hopefully, the vision and role description. And for the next couple of months or so, we can have an agreed vision for how BCS is going to approach this space, and an agreed role description to say, here's what VCOs do. Here's what VCOs do in specialist groups, in equity groups, in branches, in student chapters, in international sections. If we can get all of that done, we've got that, we understand what that vision is, here's what we do next. That VCO forum that'll be a simple one to do. I think we'll just get together. We'll have the VCOs get together and share learnings, share experiences, get better at this. And then we'll work with the non-BCS players. So those non-BCS players are NCVO, SCVO, NICVA, big charities, small charities, local government, all these kind of other players. I'd forgotten local government. Local government's going to be a massive player in this. And you want to forget something. So doing all that work with the externals is going to be a thing. And they're the next steps. So there's some resources at the end. I'll share this PowerPoint slide deck with everyone in the next hour or so after we get up here, I imagine. But that's all I wanted to say. So what I'll do now, do feel free to come off mute, by the way, now. There's a few enough people here that I think we can rely on each other being polite and speaking one at a time. And what I'll do now is I'll talk through the things we've got in the chat and read them out for those who can't read that tiny font. And then we'll talk through those and I'll see if I can answer them. So Antonio, largely from Antonio here. Can I zoom in on Zoom? Is that a thing? I can, great. Yeah, that worked, 12+ works. So if there's a lot of repetitive jobs, perhaps it's important to standardize and provide guidelines. Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, so here is one where we can say things like, I don't want to roll this out nationwide now, we're not ready. We can say, in fact, I've got one requirement that came in this morning where there's a charity fairly near here who wants some Wi-Fi. They need Wi-Fi set up. And what I'd really quite like to do is roll that one through from saying, someone's called me to say, can you help out with some charity stuff? And I've said, I can't. What I can do, though, is punch out a request to our branch members and see if anyone else can. And I'll do that. So we're going to use this as an example. We're going to use this as a way of saying, look, actually, if a charity needs Wi-Fi, then the stakeholders here are Digital Poverty Alliance, the ISP, so BT or someone like that, and someone who knows the stuff. So yeah, that repetition, absolutely. So I think that some kind of VCO forum inside BCS is the place to deal with that. We see this over and over again from charities. How do we document this and provide some resources for charities instead of doing the job over and over again? And Tony, I entirely agree. Maybe NCVO, SCVO, NICFA are the right places for that repository. I really, really like the idea, by the way, of building that relationship between NCVO, between those CVOs, NCVO, SCVO, NICFA. I'll just say NCVO for now, because the rest is a mouthful. But NCVO is England and Wales, S for Scotland, and NICFA for Northern Ireland. But yeah, totally agree. Standardised, provide guidelines, absolutely, entirely agree. Next comment there, by the way, I really like the idea of combining volunteering opportunities and opportunities for self-developing and networking, but I sense some such challenges. What safeguards do we have to prevent BCS influence? Which charities should receive support and which ones don't? Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. So there's two, well, there's three. There's at least three things there. One is that combining volunteering opportunities and self-development. Yep, totally. And I think that having a way of aligning Sophia, so skills framework for the information age, Sophia Plus, against volunteering opportunities, providing a mentor for volunteering opportunities, that could be a part of this. Having Credly digital badges for these things. I've done this work for charity. I get a badge that I can put on my CV. I'll get a digital badge from Credly or some other provider of digital badges. Yep, there's absolutely massive opportunities there. The challenges, yeah. So one of the challenges that I think you might be touching on there, I'm not sure. One of the challenges is how do we keep this safe? Safeguards. I've just realized what it meant. So there's a typo there, safeguards. One of the safeguards is general safeguarding. So Reach Volunteering, for example, do a really similar job to what STEM Learning do. And part of the admin function, and this is why I talked earlier about the admin function in this. You've got to have safeguarding. If I'm going to go into a charity and do some stuff for them, then potentially I'm going to be working with people who need safeguarding. I'm going to be working with children or vulnerable adults. I've got to be DBS checked. I've got to do things that are legal, that are ensuring everyone involved is safe. How do we put that infrastructure in place to make it all work? That's the bit that we maybe don't quite have enough of. So that's one of the aspects. I think the other part of your question, though, is BCS going to exert undue influence in supporting some charities but not others? And that's a very fair question. I don't know what the answer is, but that's a very fair question. And then thanks for, we'll ask these questions later. Regarding VCO roles and others, the current challenge I see is the egg chicken problem. We can reach out to charities to offer our contact, but without volunteers, it may be challenged to call attention. On the flip side, if we don't have a network of charities, it feels like there's a disconnect on the encouragement to volunteer without the options to offer. Yeah. And one of the wins, though, there is that actually Reach Volunteering does already exist. So Reach Volunteering is already a thing. So we're not quite starting from nowhere. We're not quite starting from scratch. So if we could improve the way that BCS links our members into something like Reach Volunteering, then that does satisfy some of that issue. So there is definitely a benefit to be had with the fact that we're not simply starting from nowhere. I absolutely take your point, though. How do you start? How do you start a thing? And this, there's perhaps an irony here, because I'm keen on getting project and program managers involved. I'm not a project or program manager. I'm not a manager of any kind at all. This is a question of business management, business change, business something. But we have specialist groups. There's a kind of irony, a useful irony, is that actually maybe some of the volunteering effort that we required is internal to BCS. It may be some of what we need is reaching out to our own specialist groups who are involved in business change and saying, look, what we need is to kick off a new initiative. We know what we want it to do. How do we do it? Now, I am absolutely not the person to do this, by the way. This is not what I do. This is not where my skill set lies. I'm seeing this need. I'm raising this need. I am not a business leader. I am not involved in business change. This is not one for me. But I think that inside BCS, we know enough people who can do this. So yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it's a fair question. I cannot answer it, but hopefully inside BCS, we have enough people who can. So I think we have two more questions Oh, we have loads more questions written down. Well, I'm going to have to speed things up. Sounds like a volunteering job board is needed that these organisations can view and approach people with appropriate skills, available time to connect. Yeah, so David Pearson, thanks for that. So that feels really quite low. One more person being admitted. So, I think I see what's going on with people being at St Desmond. I think maybe there's a clock issue going on. We've seen a couple of people joining in the past few minutes. I wonder if there's a daylight savings time thing going on with times. So sorry, we're coming to the end now. So David Pearson, sorry, that volunteering job board. So yeah, that's what Reach Volunteering is, basically. I think some of the things that are missing from this picture around Reach Volunteering are things like making sure that we have a proper value add from someone saying, look, I know what this job looks like. Here's what the Sophia skills look like. Here's what you as a volunteer can learn. Here's how we can find a mentor to help you through this. Here's how we can find you some resources that talk about how someone had done this same job for a charity really like yours, so that actually we don't need someone to do it. We just need to point you to the resources. So that curation, almost, that professional skills value add is something that we don't have. But the volunteering job board in that really, really raw form is something that we have through Reach Volunteering. There'll be others as well, by the way. Baines VSG do that locally as well. I think we just need to add that professional value add to this picture and do quite a few more things as well to make this all work. So Antonio again, what can we include in the POC to persuade HQ to invest further on this? So there's an implicit question in that one, which is persuade HQ to invest further. All of the feedback I have had in this idea has been positive. So I don't think we're going to have a massive, massive battle on our hands to get BCS HQ to agree that this is a direction we should be going in. Additionally, as it turns out, I sit on council. So I have a voice on council myself that can say we need to put effort into this. The other part of your question, though, is what can we include in the POC? So again, others generally, please do come off mute if you want to dive in here. We've got a small enough group that I will trust people to simply be polite if you come off mute. In a POC, I don't know. We've got about 10 minutes to go, by the way. I can go a few minutes over, but I appreciate that maybe others cannot. That POC thing, yeah, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what POC looks like. Certainly, I'm tracing through one requirement at the moment. So we've got one very, very particular requirement for a charity local to me that requires one thing regarding networking. And I'm going to trace that through to defining with the charity a 2-paragraph thing about what it is that they want, punting that out to our membership locally and saying, can anyone help with this? Tracing that through all the way to delivery of a solution, we can do that kind of thing. But beyond that, I don't know what else goes in POC. Oh, sorry, I've clicked the wrong button and now my, there we are, I can't read the question, there we are, I'm back. So related to what you commented about accountants and other certifications, companies and individuals can seek tax relief through pro bono work. How can we support individuals and companies to identify pro bono opportunities? Okay, yeah, so the identifying the opportunities, again, Reach Volunteering, these things already exist, charities approaching directly, that infrastructure exists already. So tax relief for some, I mean, this is kind of sweetening things a little bit for the individual. Yeah, I don't know enough about how that works, personally. Interesting. So certainly I've had to accept that not everyone is just entirely altruistic all the time, which is why I went down the road of saying, actually, this can be CPD. We can do CPD like this. We'll give you a mentor, we'll provide an infrastructure that will teach you valuable skills. To sweeten it even more, this can be tax deductible pro bono, I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it, not something where I have any experience. This is why, of course, why I want to get people more involved, because other people will know the answers to questions where I don't know the answers. Andy Mortari, why VCO, considering that nearly all BC events are open and free to non-members? Any member of public who's interested in joining? Andy, do you want to come off mute for that one? I'm not quite sure what you mean with the question.
Yes.
Do you mean why? Sorry, go
on. I've been a member of BCS for more than 30 years. Okay. I retired some 15 years ago, And at the moment, I am vice chair of IRMA,
Okay.
Information Risk Management and Assurance. Now, I find it very difficult to find volunteers to take mandatory roles of the specialists group. For quite some time, I have been having two hats, one as a vice chair and the other one as event organizer.
Yep.
And I find it, especially for event organizer, there is a lot of time involved to be spent finding a speaker and doing all the admin and communicating with the members to organize an event. So, considering that we have so much difficulty in finding volunteers to do the mandatory roles, this special role that you are suggesting, VCO, it would be an additional task. Because after all, any member of the public can join BCS events, no matter whether it is hybrid or online via Zoom. And if they're interested, they can follow these events because the old events are video recorded and the recording is available on the branch or specialist group website. So what I'm trying to say is that why do we need to go out and communicate with charities to say that here we are BCS, and our motto is making IT good for society?
So, okay, so I think I understand your question. Thanks. So I'm not at all saying that the motivation for communicating with charities is to push BCS efforts or certainly not to push BCS events. What I am saying is that the motivation for doing these things for charities is that it's the charity effort itself is the thing to deliver. I'm not saying there's any further thing that we would then get as a benefit of committing this effort to charities. I'm saying that's the goal. The goal is doing the work for charities. I'm not suggesting that we use the charity effort as a way of pushing BCS, of promoting BCS. I'm certainly not talking about BCS events. What I'm suggesting here is entirely unrelated to BCS events. So if we're thinking about BCS events like talks on technical subjects where we do the BCS hosts an event in some place after work, hosted by some branch, and members or non-members can go to the event. That's not what I'm talking about here at all, and utterly unrelated. I think that can have some value, by the way, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So what I am talking about here, though, is that the benefit of this charity effort, if we do this charity effort, is simply that, is that the charity gets something done that they need done. That's the only value here. I'm not talking about follow-on value to BCS. For the VCO role, I'm additionally not suggesting at all that BCS make this a mandatory role for committees. I think it's got some value. I'm absolutely open to the idea that I might be entirely wrong. I don't think I am. All the feedback I've had so far has been positive in this role. I think why VCO role? Because I think that for those that want to do this thing, the administration is a blocker. And I think that with a bit of effort, we can remove the administration blocker and make it easier for people who want to use their skills to do that. So I'll go back briefly to the vision if I can. Let me try and do this thing with Zoom. Sorry, it's taking more than I thought it was going to take. Here we are. So this, hopefully you can see, hopefully you can still see, by the way, that this is what I think the vision is. IT professionals who want to do the volunteering can do the volunteering. I'm not suggesting that IT professionals must do volunteering. I am suggesting that we put in place some stuff that makes it easier. And I'm additionally suggesting that BCS should encourage people to do this volunteering. And I'm additionally suggesting that BCS require fellows to do this volunteering. But the volunteering part is volunteering. It's voluntary. If members don't want to do the volunteering, they don't have to. If committees don't want to have a VCO role, they don't have to. I'm not suggesting any of this be mandatory, and I'm not suggesting it's related to BCS events at all. It's not. It's an entirely separate initiative. So hopefully that answers your question. I will push on to the last one. Sorry, Andy, by the way, because there's one final comment. How can we follow up? So thanks, Antonio, for that. That sounds really encouraging. Thank you very much. And I know that you've been really encouraging so far on LinkedIn and face-to-face as well at the last Chairs and VCs meeting. What I will do next is, and in fact, I'll try and get to next steps while I talk. What I will do next is I'll share these slides. There are some links. There is a thing that I've done on Basecamp where we have a potential for a bit of discussion forum there. I think that if we can have some people volunteering as VCOs, committees can co-opt who they like into new roles. That can be fine. So there's no admin required to make that all regulatorily sound. We're allowed to do all this stuff. I want to see a couple more VCOs and continue the discussions. So these next steps are these. Get some more VCOs involved. I think 2 or 3 would be a decent start there. A session to talk through the vision and the VCO role will be handy, and then to punt that up to BCS. So in fact, what I will do myself is say, look, we've got this VCO role, we've got this vision. I'm going to take that to council. The next council meeting is the start of May. It's about a month from now. I will today, tomorrow, speak to the chair of council and say, can we discuss this? What's the best forum in which to discuss this new initiative and get BCS involved in that way? I think for those other than me on the call, the takeaway here, I think, is consider appointing a VCO in your committee. Consider taking your member group and discussing what a VCO role might mean. So if you're a specialist group, what specialisms do you have? How would that affect volunteering of your members outside BCS? If you're a branch, think about local charities, small charities, charity support charities, NCVO, SCVO, and NICVA. If you're in some other kind of member group, think about how a VCO role might work there. Think about what that VCO role might be. If you can, find someone to take on that VCO role. I can then set up a VCO forum where we can talk more. If we can get half a dozen VCOs talking together, that will give us a much, much better way to say, look, now we know what this voluntary vision looks like. And then I'll take that vision to council and say, let's see. Thank you very much, Antonio. That's great. So on that note, that's our hour done. I think this has been really super positive. Thanks, Antonio, especially for the comments, and others who made comments in the chat, who asked questions. Really, really keen on pushing this even more. And I hope that you've learned something from this. The recording will be, thank you, Maria. The recording will be shared. That's done by BCS. I'm not sure when that will happen, but we'll punt that out somewhere as well. I've got no objection at all to sharing all this information as widely as you like. There's nothing secret going on in here. And then we will speak again as VCOs in the next, hopefully, weeks.